Welcome to the Grace Story Podcast, where inspiring stories are brought to life. This podcast is made possible by Grace College and Seminary, located on the shores of Winona Lake in the great state of Indiana. I'm your host, Dr. Drew Flam. This is the Grace Story Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, David Benzel, who is a graduate of Grace Seminary, and he's married to Sharon, who's also a graduate of Grace College. They met here while David was at the seminary, and for decades have been serving in Russia and Ukraine, and most recently at Kyiv Theological Seminary in Kiev, Ukraine. And so we are so excited and thankful for the time that David has given to us today and to our whole campus over the last few weeks. David, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
We're excited just to hear a little bit of your story, and then want to hear about your perspective on Ukraine, and even hopefully get to some ways that we can be of help. But first, let's go back in time and tell us a little bit about your time at Grace Theological Seminary.
Well, it was certainly a great time. Enjoyed studying the Bible under different teachers. Because I already had a Bible degree from college, I was able to waive a lot of the basic requirements and take extra advanced courses, and that was really not only enjoyable but profitable for me later, because I almost got 3 different majors in New Testament, Old Testament, and theology, and then ended up teaching all of that down the road. So
now, I remember there was sometime in there towards the end of seminary where you began to think about the potential of going to Eastern Europe. Tell us a little bit about how that came into picture for you and Sharon.
Well, just as we were, as it was getting closer to graduation, and once I got married, it started going slower, but it did finally come. And it was right when the Soviet Union started to open up, Gorbachev and the Glasnost and all that, and so we just started looking into that, different contacts that we had of information, and one man in particular had come over to the Soviet Union. Just the Lord did miraculous things, seating him on the train by a pastor and things like that, and he just opened up lots of contacts. And so hearing his stories, his testimony about all that, we just thought maybe the Lord's opening up. Maybe that's a place that we can serve. And so when we heard about a little language program that was being set up, we thought, let's try that and see if there's an open door for us. We can work with the church there if they want us to come.
Wow! Did you first go to Russia then, or where was?
We were going to the Soviet Union. Okay. We were going to Kiev.
Yeah, you were going to Kiev.
But by the time we got there, it was already Ukraine. It was already separate, and so we actually arrived there on the first day of their official independence
as a new country.
Yeah, sovereign country, and studied there for a year, and thought we were invited back by the church, and so we thought, okay, this is what the Lord would like us to do. And while we were back home raising support to come, then a new opportunity opened up in the mission, asked us to consider that, and our church agreed to sending us to, it was Far East Russia, the city of Khabarovsk. And there was a Bible college that was already open, but it didn't have anyone there to lead it. And so 4 of us went, us and another couple from Grace also. And so we were there for 14 years.
And then after those 14 years, is that when you moved back to Kiev?
Yeah, then some laws changed, and we weren't allowed to stay there anymore. There were places in Russia that have continued to accept people, grant temporary residency, they call it. But none of those places had schools, and Ukraine has several schools, and so that just seemed like a better option. But we came to Ukraine not knowing what we were going to do, just feeling like, well, this is where there's a lot more opportunities. So.
So you came to Ukraine not knowing what you were going to do. How did you end up at Kyiv Theological Seminary?
Well, our mission, Send International, already had involvement there, but in several schools. And I just made myself available. We got there just because of the timing of all of it, when they passed the new laws and whatnot in Russia, and we had to leave. We ended up there in November. Well, the school year's all set in November, so there was nothing open. But in God's plan, a teacher couldn't come. They needed somebody on short notice, and so I filled in. And after that, they asked me to keep teaching.
So you tell us a little bit about the seminary pre-2022. You know, how's the seminary set up? What kind of students do you teach? How does it look similar or different to what we may understand?
It's similar in a lot of ways, except when we think of seminary, we often think of we always think of postgraduate.
Sure.
But for them, seminary is what they call any Bible school. So most of our students have not been to college before, don't have a bachelor's degree, that anything equivalent to that. We do have some. So it's a little bit different. It's a little more introductory, you could say, and a lot of students, it's the first time they've read, or maybe in a long time read textbooks and written papers or anything like that. But they all are. I've heard from friends, colleagues here about teaching at some place, teaching even a Bible class, saying, it's really kind of sad because a lot of my students don't want to be in this class. Like say an Old Testament survey class, which I love teaching over there. And here I've heard people say hardly anyone wants to be there. They have to because it's a requirement, and they ought to love it, but they don't. And it shows that's not the case for us. They all want to be there. They're all making a big sacrifice to be there, and they're all involved in ministry. That's just part of who's accepted, So they're involved in some kind of ministry already. They want to be there. They really value it, and it really shows in class. So it's very fun, exciting to teach them. They're very attentive, lots of good questions, and blank slates in a lot of ways. They just don't know their Bibles very well.
So not typically kind of an 18 to 22-year-old or somebody right out of college. This is somebody who's in the ministry, and they aren't necessarily living in Kiev. Maybe they are, but they're coming for modular classes. Is that right?
Yeah, coming for modular classes. And when you say in the ministry, it's better to say in a ministry. Yeah. It may be teaching Sunday schools, it may be leading a youth group, it may be doing some kind of evangelism, having an evangelism team or something in their church. It may be being a pastor. We've got that. We've got chaplains also, a chaplains program even. So any kind of ministry, women's ministry.
And you said it's like the classes are 30-something hours?
The standard classes are 36 hours in 1 week. Yeah. So,
you're not tired after that week, are you?
It's a tough week, yeah. But they would take one or two week sessions. So and then they'd go back home for like 6 weeks and then come back again.
Well, that makes sense how your background, having, a lot of different avenues, old, new, it's allowed you to be able to be used in many different ways. Yeah.
And, I'm not teaching at master's level also. And I'm just personally thankful that I didn't have to, I didn't have to specialize so much when I studied. And then as a teacher, I didn't have to specialize. I didn't just have to stay in Old Testament or New Testament or theology. I could stay big picture, and I think that really helped me see the gospel better. Not just one aspect of it. Maybe someone that specializes sees it more deeply, but I've enjoyed seeing it in more of the full spectrum.
I want to talk a little bit about the church and the gospel and life in Ukraine, because we all read lots of articles, and and try to understand a little bit about what's going on. But tell us a little bit just the church. How would you express the church in Ukraine as compared to what we may experience here in the United States?
Um, Evangelicalism, the evangelical church, is not the norm there, as in many ways it is for many of us here. And it's an Orthodox world. Orthodoxy is the norm, and so these people are a clear minority. Although in Ukraine was always the Bible Belt of the Soviet Union. Always a lot more believers there than in other places, than anywhere in Russia or in the Central Asian countries, and that's where more of the people were taken and sent to the gulags and whatnot, and it still has a thriving, growing evangelical church, and lots of young people, and they are not, at least. I don't see all the churches, all the people in the churches. I see maybe the cream of the crop. They're the ones that want to come study. That's who I interact with. But they are so excited to serve the Lord, and it's just in the country's full of them. I mean, relative. I don't just teach it. I haven't just taught at Kyiv Theological Seminary. I taught it in all the big cities, in all the big seminaries there, and traveled around and teach. It's one of the nice things. Teaching modular classes allows you that opportunity, and all the schools are modular there. And so seeing, wow, our school is full. We have like 250, 300 students, and other schools have, 200, 400 maybe. One school's a little bigger. But so several schools full of these young people. And the churches are full of young people. It's very exciting. Maybe roughly 1 out of 40 or 50 people in Ukraine is an evangelical believer. Yeah. So not near the percentage that you'd see here, but way higher than anywhere else in all of what is called Eurasia, the part that's between Europe and Asia, which is really a huge, huge area, way bigger than the United States. But that's they're the Bible Belt for that whole area.
And I remember I read somewhere you saying the church is more like your family, right?
Oh yeah, young people especially, they'll come to church every day, every evening, because they want to be there. They want to be with each other. It's not like, well, I have to, or God's going to be mad at me, or my parents are making me. I want to be. These are my friends. These are my family. These are the people that I want to spend time with. And so they think up reasons. Okay, let's sing songs tonight. Let's play games tonight. What are we going to do tonight? So they want to be together.
You told students in chapel a couple weeks ago just some of the lifestyle differences between a typical Ukrainian and maybe someone in the United States who's middle class, let's say. What are some of those just daily differences of life in Ukraine?
Yeah, Ukraine is a second world country. It's not third world. It's second world. It's got high tech. In lots of areas. I mean, we've been paying our bills for a couple of years now online, and some people just hardly don't even use cash, hardly. But then you may, as soon as you get out of town, you may homes may have an outdoor toilet or things like that suddenly remind you, oh wait, this is not first world. It's different. It's a combination of first and third, and the standard of living is definitely lower than the rest of Europe and what we would find here. People may just have a few sets of clothes, maybe a really nice set of clothes that they just wear every day outside. But inside, they're not going to wear their dress clothes at all because, those are for outside. And so just a lot, you go into somebody's house, it's a lot sparser than what you might expect and what you'd see here. And people maybe have different priorities on what they want to spend their money on.
And so, leading up to the war and Russia's attack, you came home to the United States. You came back to the United States in January, I believe, right? Had you sort of, seen this coming, or what was your life experience of this conflict coming to your city?
We definitely were aware of it. I'm for the country of Ukraine, for our mission, I was responsible to kind of keep an eye on that, closer tabs on it, so that other people didn't have to pay as much attention and report to security people in our mission, so they'd be aware of what's going on. So I kind of had to pay closer attention to it, but it was definitely building up when there were threats made, and once embassies started pulling people out, and they're starting to talk about canceling flights and stuff, then it started. Okay, this is getting more and more serious, and we just happened to have. I finished the class, and I'd had several classes in a row, and then now had a 5-week break. With nothing, and just thought, well, maybe we were going to do something for our break anyway, go to somewhere in Europe, but COVID is was still closing a lot of European countries, so we just thought, well, let's head back to the U.S. for a while, and if things do shut down, we'll already be here. We wouldn't want to be in Europe somewhere and in the living in somebody's home or something there. So Lord worked it out that we just came home, and then. By the time we were due to come back, the flights had already been canceled, and then just a few days before we were due to come back, the war started.
Wow. So tell us the current state of Kyiv Theological Seminary, where you work, and just what does life look like at the seminary now?
Well, of course, everything's been put on hold, and our students had already been sent home, like maybe 2 weeks before. Whoever was there, they just didn't have the next session. It should be better to say they didn't bring them in. But and we just switched to online classes. But once the war started, then that was the end of classes for now. No, people just can't think about that stuff right now. But they're still staying in touch with people, thankfully. COVID, and even before COVID, we were already moving towards what can we do online. And Ukrainians are, it seems to me, way more into contacting each other on their phones and staying in touch that way. And so our teachers and the administration especially, and the students have really been in touch a lot, and we've had Zoom meetings of faculty, and I'm serve on the executive committee that helps the president make decisions and whatnot, and we've had a couple meetings and stuff online. So we're still meeting, but it's kind of like, okay, it's all in limbo because we don't know when we can actually start, and when are students going to be ready to start thinking about having classes again. And when they do, it's kind of hard to imagine that way we just start right again with a full block of class time. That what if we start having maybe just some evening, a few hours, a couple times a week, having a class kind of spread out like that? Would that be a way to kind of get students back into the mode and stuff? And some are busy; they're scattered all over. I didn't say, but Kiev was not surrounded, but certainly threatened and by the forces, and now that's been eased off a bit, although missiles still hit there, just as today they did. But students, faculty, administration, and their families are spread out all over, and some are even out of the country. The men, of course, couldn't leave, but unless they have more than 3 kids, then they can leave, and some it's often the Baptist families that have the bigger families. But even those men have been using their freedom to cross the line to actually take refugees across, bring supplies back, and using it actually to serve. So it's been a blessing that they had that opportunity to go back and forth across the border. But some people now are starting to head back to Kiev, feel it's a little safe, just want to get back home. They're tired of, they've been living in a suitcase now for a month and a half, and
just want to be home.
yeah.
What the gospel and just how you mentioned Ukraine kind of being the Bible Belt. What's your perspective on, and I think you even talked about Ukraine becoming more of a sending nation of missionaries, and some of the students you had were going other places. Talk about, what you see for the church and for the gospel through all of this strife and difficulty and war.
When we first came to Kiev, we were just in shock at how many believers there were. How many churches? There's more churches in Kiev than there was in all of Far East Russia. And, of course, there's way more, there's almost as many people in Kiev. Not quite, but half as many as in all of Far East Russia. But just way more believers. And not just way more believers, but growing believers and growing churches and maturity that was not near as common in Far East Russia. I mean, when the flames are spread out, they tend to die out, but when they're together, they build up. And that's the way Kiev and Ukraine was. Of course, there's several places throughout the country that are even more concentrated, lots of good, healthy churches. And so we kind of had, in our mission, was kind of, we've been here for 20-some years. People at first came to Ukraine and to the former Soviet Union thinking we got to help them build churches and stuff, but we were always committed to helping the church that already existed. But we kind of starting to feel like, well, wow, they're really going on their own. What can we contribute, and what are we here for? And we finally realized that, well, there's one area that they really need help. They want help in, and that's in the whole area of missions. And they weren't allowed to even think about that under communism. But now all of a sudden it's an opportunity. But it took a while for them to kind of realize that, hey, we can do this. I remember the first Ukrainian that returned from a mission trip, not a trip, but he and his wife and child had lived there for a couple of years in Papua New Guinea in the jungle. And I don't remember who they were serving with there, but bringing back, showing pictures. They spoke in our chapel at the seminary, and they also spoke in our church we attend, and just the amazement of people. These are Ukrainians are doing this today, and since that time, Ukrainians have gone to many different places. They're throughout Asia, Taiwan, China, whatnot. Of course, Russia and several different places. Lots of unreached people groups in Russia, over 100. Working with some of those. Europe, it's a little harder to go, but especially Poland. Some of the harder just because it's so expensive for them to send missionaries there. But also Africa, Uganda. I just was so surprised all of a sudden hearing some graduates coming back and speaking in chapel. Oh, these are pictures from our time in Uganda. Like, what? And, doing kids camps, and the kids camps led to meetings with pastors, and then the pastors were saying, can you do classes for us? And so then faculty start going back, and I don't know how many trips from our circle of acquaintances affiliated with the school have gone to Uganda. We were just starting to do something with Armenia also. A graduate had come. And so all over, Ukrainians are going. It's at least in the dozens that I know of personally that are missionaries. And it's probably in the hundreds already. And one of the goals of our mission, Send International, is to help them set up a sending council and an interdenominational one that can serve the little groups, the big groups, all of them together, and help them send out missionaries. And it's very close to. It's not functioning independently, but it is already sending people out. And there wouldn't be any problem if you were to show up with a fat wallet full of funds and say, I'd like to send out 100 people. You'd have a couple hundred volunteers. Yeah, just that quick. It's the thing that's holding it back is the funding. That Ukrainian, and we don't want to just, here's the money, we'll send the people. We want them to be sending them so that, when the time comes that the funds dry up, they're doing it, yeah. And so, we help with capital expenses and getting things started and whatnot. But we want it to be them doing the sending and the churches.
And now with the war, how do you see, that's not going to happen in the same way, but how do you see the gospel going forward?
Well, first of all, churches have been reaching out very effectively for the last couple decades. But what I'm hearing now from pastors that we're helping send funds to and whatnot as they interact with refugees and whatnot, saying this is like it was in the 90s when there was kind of this, the walls came down and people could own a Bible without being scared and go to church without, somebody writing down their name. And so they're like, what is all this, And that's what they're saying. It's like now people are saying, it's kind of the foxhole faith kind of thing where, well, there's danger. Maybe I need to turn to God. And people are open. How genuine it all is and whatnot, but people are open. And one church I'm thinking of in particular, Poltava, is kind of the first stopping point when you leave some of the worst places, Kyiv and Sumy. They stop in Poltava and then they go further. And this church has, they have dozens and dozens of people every day. And they just do conversational things about, how does God fit into your everyday life? That's some of the questions he asks, things like that. And people are just sitting there talking about it, but having escaped from bombs and living in bomb shelters and stuff, they're open. So that's, we just pray that God uses that in the lives of many Ukrainians. Then another way that Ukrainians, you think all those millions of people that have left, although a lot of them are starting to come back now, but 1 out of every 40 or 50 of those is an evangelical. And it wouldn't surprise me, you get a whole bunch of these people coming into an area. There may be more Ukrainian believers in that area than there are of, whatever, the Hungarian or Bulgarian or Serbian, wherever they end up in some of those countries, Czech especially, there's just not very many believers there. But now all of a sudden there's a bunch of Ukrainian believers that are there, and you pray that they have an impact in that country. A lot of those, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those Ukrainians don't come back. Now, the fact that families are separated for believers, that's hard. Ukrainians in general, I would imagine that a lot of them they'll find a better life because it is nicer there.
So even the refugee, experiences they're having, they may, because they're going to first world countries. Yeah. Some of them, and maybe a lot of them are stepping into the nicest places they've ever seen or lived in. Wow. So that's going to be hard for them to go back. Because of Ukraine knows that, and they're talking about we've got to when you come back, we're going to have a place just as nice for you when you come back. And they're talking that way now. They're saying we're gonna be totally European. We're gonna rebuild and be first world after this war. So that's a hope that's being presented. And if that were to happen, you expect that there would also be, good jobs, paying jobs, that the churches would then be prosperous enough that they can do more to send out people. So, Ukraine was never
a threatening kind of country. Like if a missionary from the U.S. shows up, in some places that's like, whoa, who are you, imperialist Western? and if some other countries, they're a little bit scary. Even a Russian missionary, and there are some, but that some people would be scared of that. But no one has been scared of, oh, you're Ukrainian, step back. No. And now, just the amazing thing about how the whole world now knows Ukraine,
Right.
pretty much where it is. They know the capital's Kiev, and they know some of the cities and stuff, and they know what they're going through, and they know they're not afraid of them, and instead they respect them.
Yes.
And so hopefully, that is another open door for the gospel as Ukrainian missionaries, Ukrainian believers go to different places, whether it's voluntarily as a missionary or involuntarily as a refugee, that they're going to find a new open door for the gospel there.
It's amazing. And it just, that despite devastation and destruction, the word of God is living and active, and it's changing people's lives. And you continue to be a part of that back here in the States, supporting folks who are there in Ukraine. I mean, what does kind of daily life look like for you now as you are trying to help people and support and communicate? In what ways are you doing that, and what does that look like?
Yeah, we're still a little bit in limbo too, because we still wanted to go back and hope to go back, although our time there was wrapping up. We're getting close to retiring. They're planning on it this summer. But right now, because I went through the work, and it was definitely work of getting a bank account set up in such a way that I can receive dollars, convert it to hryvnia, Ukrainian currency, and then send those to somebody's card, all from my phone. Because that was set up and it's still working, thankfully. The mission, our mission, Send International, people have just been so generous. I don't know what the number is at now. A month ago, it was already $500,000 had been given, and so I would imagine it's a lot higher now. But we've just been asking people, again, staying in touch with Ukraine. It's very easy. They definitely do that, want to do that, and just, hey, what needs to have you seen there? Who needs help, buying gas so they can evacuate people? Who needs help buying humanitarian aid or fixing lunches for people that are spending the night and things like that? And so we're just, it's easy for me to just transfer that funds right to that guy's credit card and bank card, and they just go spend the money right there.
Wow. And so if somebody wanted to help support that, go to Send.
Yeah, send.org. Yeah, send.org. And there's a big button on the page that says Help Ukraine Fund. And 100% of the funds go right to helping these people.
And you are getting to be that conduit between generosity and then needs, because you know the people, and that's amazing. That's probably not a ministry you ever expected to have, but it's a big one nonetheless, and it's a really needed one.
Well, it's nice that we have something that we can do from here. And another thing that's related is when the pastor then, or whoever we've sent funds to, if they write back and say, this is what's been happening, this is how the Lord's used it, here's what we're seeing, then those are, of course, in Ukrainian or in Russian, so I translate them for the mission, so the mission can see what donors, people that have given, can see what's going on there, read the thanks. So,
as we kind of wrap up, we mentioned giving is one way that people can certainly help, and praying, right, is of course. What would you say are specific ways that we can pray for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people and the church in Ukraine?
Well, I would say, we don't want to see another person die. We don't want to see another person suffer. We don't want to see another bomb fall. Those are things that God uses and whatnot. But we can certainly pray that it comes to an end. But knowing that He's got the perfect number for all of that. But I think that along with praying for an end to the hostilities, would be just praying for strength for believers that are really trying to serve, and safety for them. Some of them are doing risky things, going into villages that have been bombed but have not yet been rescued. And, one pastor talked about, going down from basement to basement checking. Wow. And you can't just say, is anyone here, because they don't know who you are and they're not going to answer. You got to go down and show yourself and see if there's somebody there and say, look, I'm here to help you. I'm friendly. I'm not here to hurt you. And, rescuing them, getting them out and getting shot at and stuff. So pray for those kind of people putting their life on the line, but also just the people that are dealing with this whole stream of refugees that are trying to minister, helping physically, but also trying to help introduce them to God and help heal their souls, their spirits, as they deal with all this stuff that's been going on now for months. Pray for the future. Once this is over, things are really starting to build up. We had our biggest new group of new students, 72 new students in August, September. What's going to happen? Are any of those going to return or not? And so that's several different schools are in that same kind of situation, and not just schools, but publishing houses and other kinds of ministries and churches. The same thing. Our whole church left Kiev. Just a few people stayed there, and usually they had some reason, like an older family member that couldn't leave or didn't want to leave, and things like that. So are they all going to come back again? What's church going to be like? There's a whole lot of pastors that are worried. What is my life, my ministry going to look like when this finishes? And so there's the now. God, give them grace now, give them mercy now, give them strength now, but also what's going to happen afterwards. And there's going to just be all kinds of new temptations, and and believers that have left, especially mothers and children, they're going to get settled in there. Are they going to come back? Do they need to come? I mean, does God want them to come back or not? Those are hard questions to answer.
Pray for pray for safety, pray for the gospel to go forward, and then pray for wisdom for whatever is next. Well, thank you for sharing, and thank you for just being available to us as a campus. It's meant a lot to our students, to us as faculty and staff, to have someone who is one of us as a Grace Seminary graduate here to share a firsthand experience of how God is using these difficult times and how we can be involved. And so I just want to say thank you for the ways that you've invested back in this community during a time that's difficult for you as well. So I appreciate that. And thanks to all of you for listening today to the Grace Story podcast. Music was written and produced by Dr. Wally Brath, Assistant Professor of Worship Arts at Grace College. And thanks to our co-producers, Ryan and Rick. And if you could do us a huge favor and rate or comment on the podcast, share it with others so that they can hear David's story, that would be great. Until next time, live your best Grace story today.